Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk, where we dig into the artistry, the quirks, and the downright weird side of cinema to explore what makes films unforgettable. I'm Josh Bell, your host, and if you've been tuning in, you know I'm a massive Tim Burton fan. This series has been a real journey through his unique world, from suburban fairy tales to outlandish fantasy, and today we're taking on a film that leads into gothic horror with a darker edge. We're going to talk about Sleepy Hollow, Burton's 1999 take on the classic American ghost story. This film is fascinating in his lineup, not just because it's a period piece, but because it pushes Burton's signature darkness into a full-blown horror thriller. Unlike his other spooky works, Sleepy Hollow combines gothic horror with supernatural suspense in a way that's visually striking and eerie. This is Burton's going all in on intensity, diving into Washington Irving's classic tale, but making it truly his own. With Sleepy Hollow, we get a glimpse of Burton's incredible visual storytelling, alongside his love for the supernatural and his ability to create tension within richly designed worlds. If you're familiar with Tim Burton, you know how he brings the extraordinary to life. And here, he uses his cinematic toolkit to elevate the tale of the Headless Horseman beyond the typical Halloween tale. From the foggy, foreboding landscape to the chilling yet strangely beautiful visuals, this movie has it all. So today we're breaking it down. The style, the story, the performances, and even those Burton-esque touches that make Sleepy Hollow so memorable. Whether you're watching it for the thrill, the eerie visuals, or just because you're a horror fan or a Tim Burton fan, Sleepy Hollow delivers something that has stayed with fans for decades. There's a lot to unpack with this one, so let's jump right in to Sleepy Hollow and take a stroll through Burton's world of haunted forests, lurking specters, and gothic mystery. Alright, so here's the rundown on Sleepy Hollow. This is Tim Burton's own haunting twist on Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, where he pulls out all the stops to make this ghost story both eerie and visually stunning. The plot follows Ichabod Crane, played by Johnny Depp, who Burton reimagines not as the superstitious schoolteacher from Washington Irving's tale, but as a slightly awkward yet doggedly determined constable from New York City. Ichabod's assignment? Investigate a string of bizarre, brutal murders in the isolated village of Sleepy Hollow, where each victim has been found decapitated. The village is gripped by fear, and the locals are convinced that the culprit is a headless horseman, a spectral rider risen from the grave. And while Ichabod is a skeptic and firmly rooted in his modern scientific methods, the deeper he dives into his investigation, the more he finds himself unraveling the dark secrets hiding in Sleepy Hollow. There are cover-ups, family feuds, and enough occult undertones to make anyone question what's real and what's out of this world. The mix of horror and fantasy is what gives Sleepy Hollow its unique tone. Burton plays with the surreal and supernatural, amplifying each eerie detail with his unmistakable gothic aesthetic. The town itself feels like a character with its mist-laden forests, twisted trees in perpetual shadow, perfectly atmospheric for the Halloween season. This isn't just a ghost story though, it's a gothic fairy tale where horror and dark beauty collide. And what makes Ichabod such an interesting protagonist here is that, in typical Burton style, he's very much an outsider. Ichabod's nervous, somewhat quirky. His personality and his insistence on science clash with the townsfolk's staunch belief in the supernatural. The clash not only fuels tension in the story, but also digs into one of the film's core themes: the tension between logic and myth, between skepticism and faith. As he struggles to unravel the mystery, Ichabod's perspective slowly shifts, making him start to question his own beliefs. Tim Burton's visual and thematic style is on full display in Sleepy Hollow. Right from the opening scene, you're plunged into a world that's quintessentially Burton. It's eerie, it's surreal, the landscape feels pulled straight from a twisted storybook. The film's gothic design immerses you in an environment that feels ancient, ominous, and brimming with foreboding. Cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki collaborates seamlessly here with Burton, using this muted, almost desaturated color palette that makes the visuals seem chilling and out of this world. The ever-present fog, the bare trees twisted in unnatural angles, and the darkened skies give Sleepy Hollow a timeless and supernatural quality that is a uniquely Burton vision. One of the most remarkable aspects here is Burton's direction is how the physical setting becomes a character in the film. Sleepy Hollow is not just a town. It's a spectral landscape where danger lurks behind every corner. The village is cobbled together with crooked rooftops, dimly lit interiors, and this atmosphere that's both claustrophobic yet vast. It's a world that feels dreamlike and nightmarish at the same time. And the infamous Tree of the Dead, which Burton designed to look almost sentient, as though it's not just part of the landscape, but an ancient, knowing presence. Its gnarled branches and haunting roots are reminders of the darkness at the heart of the story, symbolizing the way history and horror can be buried but never entirely forgotten. Of course, Burton's surrealist tendencies are on full display as well. No Burton film would be complete without that otherworldly, almost macabre touch that makes his work so distinctive. The Headless Horseman, for instance, is a character right out of a fever dream, brought to life through a careful mix of CGI and traditional practical effects. Burton blends special effects with prosthetics to create a terrifying figure that feels tangibly menacing, avoiding the too polished look of heavy CGI. This restraint adds an almost mythic quality to the film, making the Headless Horseman here a figure that's both real and nightmarishly unreal, kind of like a story told around a campfire that's coming to life right before your eyes. Burton's recurring themes of misfits and outsiders play out strongly here, adding depth to the horror. Ichabod Crane, played by Johnny Depp, is the ultimate outsider, a city detective with a modern scientific outlook, thrown into this superstitious rural town where people hold on to these ancient beliefs. He arrives with gadgets and an air of skepticism, a man of reason in a world dominated by fear and folklore. But it's this very clash that makes him a Burton protagonist. Ichabod is an outsider in more ways than one, caught between the logical world he understands and the supernatural forces he fears. His vulnerability and awkwardness not only make him relatable, but elevate the tension in a town that seems to see him as an interloper. In Sleepy Hollow, Burton doesn't just blur the lines between fantasy and reality, he obliterates it. He creates a story that feels like both a horror film and a dark, twisted fairy tale. Sleepy Hollow might look like a straightforward adaptation of Washington Irving's tale, but Burton's direction makes it something much more. It's an exploration of fear, belief, and the allure of the unknown. By blending old world horror with a fantastical, almost playful approach to the supernatural, Burton crafts this cinematic space that's wholly unique, inviting us to step into a world where reality and myth are one and the same. Now we gotta talk about the cast, beginning with Burton's frequent partner in crime, Johnny Depp. Depp's portrayal of Ichabod Crane is, as usual, anything but conventional. Instead of delivering a traditionally heroic character, Depp leans into Ichabod's quirks and insecurities, creating this character who's far more awkward scientist than brave investigator. Depp's nervous energy as Ichabod, particularly his aversion to blood and his hyper-analytical nature, add a layer of humor and vulnerability. It's his exaggerated reactions, like fainting or flinching in horror, that make Ichabod oddly relatable and ground him in this otherwise grim and gothic world. This contrast between his personality and the macabre setting enhances the tension and the humor, showing that Depp is probably the perfect collaborator to bring out Burton's vision of the outsider hero. Christina Ricci plays Katrina von Tassel, Ichabod's love interest. She's haunting and ethereal and feels tailor-made for Burton's gothic fairy tale and storytelling in general. Though her role is somewhat limited in action, Ricci makes her character both mysterious and alluring, embodying an innocence tinged with darkness. Katrina isn't simply the passive damsel. Her family history ties her deeply to the story's dark, supernatural undercurrents, giving her a layered mystique. Ricci's delicate, almost otherworldly appearance fits seamlessly into the Burton aesthetic. It adds an extra touch of fantasy to the tale while subtly hinting at the darkness that is within her family lineage. And then, of course, there's Christopher Walken as the fearsome Headless Horseman. Although he doesn't have a lot of screen time, Walken leaves his mark on the film. With his sharp, animalistic teeth and piercing, wide-eyed stare, Walken's portrayal of the horseman is primal and nightmarish. Even without his head, Walken's physicality in his scenes gives his character a terrifying, powerful presence. He infuses the horseman with a kind of demonic energy that elevates him beyond a simple villain to a force of nature. Walken's performance as the horseman embodies pure menace, and Burton's decision to cast him with a stroke of brilliance that enhances the film's horror elements. Behind the camera, we also have the legendary Danny Elfman once again composing the score, and it's hard to overstate how critical his music is to creating Sleepy Hollow's haunting atmosphere. Elfman, the longtime Burton collaborator, brings his signature style, crafting a score that's both gothic and suspenseful. His music weaves seamlessly between haunting melodies and intense, adrenaline-pumping rhythms that punctuates the horseman's appearances, heightening both the eerie tension and the excitement of each encounter. The use of choral elements and deep strings adds a ghostly quality to the score and ground it firmly in the film's old-world horror aesthetic. The film also features excellent work from other key collaborators. Costume designer Colleen Atwood is back. She brings authenticity to the style of the characters, this 18th century attire, creating garments that not only look period accurate, but reflect each character's personality. Atwood's designs for Ichabod, with his tailored and eccentric coat and gadgets, highlight his outsider status and meticulous nature, and they almost read steampunk. Production designer Rick Heinrichs deserves major credit as well, transforming Sleepy Hollow into a fog-drenched village that feels timeless and cursed. His work on the ominous Tree of the Dead and the haunted forest surroundings add even more depth to Burton's vision. It brings the supernatural world of Sleepy Hollow to life in a way that's both fantastical and unnerving. Together, the performances and collaborations create this cohesive world that is equal parts horror and fairy tale, and underscore Burton's uncanny ability to make his stories to this point feel both intimate and grand. The team assembled for Sleepy Hollow, from the cast to the costume design and the musical score, enhance the eerie charm here and spine-tingling suspense and make this film very memorable, giving us an experience that's thrilling and enchanting. One of the most intriguing layers in Sleepy Hollow is its exploration of themes like identity, isolation, and the clash between science and superstition. Burton takes a timeless horror story and he injects it with a rich, symbolic depth that makes it feel like more than just a ghost story. It becomes a reflection on human nature and our struggle with the unknown. For Ichabod Crane, this journey isn't just about solving a mystery. It's a confrontation with his own past, his own fears, and his own belief systems. His character's rigid adherence to scientific reasoning is constantly tested in Sleepy Hollow, a place where the lines between myth and reality seem to dissolve in the fog all around. Burton uses Ichabod's experiences to question the limits of reason and rationality, showing how fear and mystery often exist in realms that science alone could never explain. It's a theme that resonates with horror fans, many of whom are drawn to the genre precisely for its willingness to explore the unknown. And symbolism is everywhere in Sleepy Hollow. The Headless Horseman is more than just a terrifying specter. He's a symbol of vengeance and retribution, almost like a force of nature set loose upon the guilty. Without a head, the horseman is stripped of individual identity, making him a universal representation of blind justice or fate, dispensed without regard for personal history. And then Burton builds upon this symbolism with the infamous Tree of the Dead, which stands as this grotesque monument to the horseman's curse. Its twisted, root-like tendrils and bloody history make it feel like a portal to the underworld, symbolizing the raw, supernatural forces that are lying just below the surface of the rational world. Ichabod's reliance on science and rationality in this setting is another layer of Burton's thematic work. Ichabod, with his experimental gadgets and obsession with empirical proof, represents the modern mind's quest to understand and control nature. By contrasting him with the superstitious, deeply traditional villagers of Sleepy Hollow, Burton emphasizes the tension between enlightenment and ancient beliefs. As Ichabod is drawn further into the supernatural elements of the story, he's then forced to confront the limits of his own scientific approach. Burton uses him as the stand-in for the modern world, questioning whether our quest for knowledge might sometimes be outpaced by forces that are beyond our comprehension. This blending of the rational and the supernatural is what gives Sleepy Hollow its unique character, making it as thought-provoking as it is truly haunting. Now, when Sleepy Hollow was released, it was met with a warm reception from both critics and audiences. Financially, it performed well. It grossed over $200 million worldwide, which was a significant success for a horror film at its time. Critics praised Burton's atmospheric direction, Johnny Depp's refreshingly offbeat performance, and the film's mesmerizing visual style. It's no surprise that Sleepy Hollow went on to win the Academy Award for Best Art Direction, a testament to its attention to detail and dedication to that gothic aesthetic. The film's visual design, including those set pieces, costume choices, and Burton's signature use of light and shadow, elevate it from typical horror fare into this immersive experience that critics and audiences recognized as a work of art in its own right. While Sleepy Hollow may not have reached that same cult classic status as Burton's earlier films like Beetlejuice or Edward Scissorhands, it has maintained a loyal following over the years, particularly among fans of gothic horror. The film stands out in Burton's body of work as one of his more mature and atmospheric efforts, a love letter to classic horror stories, blended with his unique and distinct storytelling approach. Over time, Sleepy Hollow has even seen a bit of a critical resurgence, with many reevaluating its place within Burton's filmography as one of his most visually impressive and emotionally layered films. The movie also left an impact on the horror genre, inspiring a wave of gothic horror films and TV series that sought to capture a similar tone. From the aesthetic of period horror pieces to the use of folklore and gothic visuals, Burton's Sleepy Hollow showed that horror could be beautiful, almost painterly, while still being bone-chilling. Its influence extended to shows like Penny Dreadful, The Recent Haunting of Hill House, proving that Burton's unique approach to horror has left an imprint on popular culture. It's demonstrated that horror can embrace style, art direction, and atmosphere without ever sacrificing the suspense or inspiring filmmakers to experiment with the genre in new creative ways. Now, there's some fascinating behind-the-scenes work that went into Sleepy Hollow, starting with the incredible attention to detail and set design. Rather than shooting on location, Tim Burton had almost the entire village built from scratch on sound stages in England. This decision allowed him to practically control every element of the setting: lighting, fog, weather effects, all tailored to create the haunting, otherworld look he wanted. The result is a gothic environment that feels expansive but claustrophobic, drawing us right into Burton's surreal and darkly romantic vision. The craftsmanship on these sets was incredible, down to those twisted trees and cobblestone streets. You can really sense that each piece of the village was designed to transport us back to this eerie and supernatural past. Another cool fact: Sleepy Hollow marked one of Burton's darker, bloodier projects, which was a departure from what his previous work was. Burton insisted on this more intense visual elements, like the headless bodies and the blood splatter, giving the film its distinct style. He collaborated closely with special effects and makeup teams to make sure the bloodier moments were visually striking without tipping into pure horror gore territory. The way the effects team achieved this balance is clever. They used a bright, almost hyper-stylized red for the blood, which gives the scene a slightly cartoonish quality that keeps them in Burton's world of dark fantasy, even as the violence does feel intense. And here's a fun fact about the Horseman himself. Actor Ray Park, who famously played Darth Maul in Star Wars The Phantom Menace, actually did the stunt work here for the Headless Horseman scenes. So even though Christopher Walken played the Horseman in close-up shots, it was Park who performed most of the riding and fight choreography. The casting choice gave the Horseman an intense, almost supernatural physicality that really heightens the suspense of his scenes. Burton, who also worked closely here with his longtime collaborator and friend Danny Elfman to create the score that's perfectly matched to the eerie atmosphere. Elfman's music combines those haunting melodies with a grand, almost operatic tone, amplifying the gothic romance and the horror in each scene. The music alone pulls you deeper into Sleepy Hollow's foggy woods and shadowed streets, and it's hard to imagine the film having the same impact without it. Elfman's score became such an essential part of the film, it's often credited with adding extra tension and emotion, making the film truly an immersive experience. All these elements, custom sets, unique effects, and that memorable score really show how much love and creativity went into bringing Sleepy Hollow to life. It truly is a testament to Burton's dedication to building a world that feels as eerie and timeless as the legend itself. So, Sleepy Hollow. What a fascinating blend of horror, mystery, and gothic beauty, right? This film is one of those cinematic experiences that just looks and feels like Halloween. Burton took the classic Washington Irving tale, which most of us know from childhood ghost stories, and made it into something undeniably unique. He pulled out all the stops to craft a world here where horror meets fairy tale, where every shadow has a purpose and every fog-drenched frame adds to the story's sinister charm. So for me, while it's not a perfect film, Sleepy Hollow delivers such a memorable atmosphere that it more than makes up for its small flaws. Sure, there are parts where the pacing could be a bit tighter, and some of the supporting characters maybe feel underdeveloped or underused, But the strengths of Depp's quirky, inventive take on Ichabod, Burton's immersive world building really shine. It's not every day that you get a horror movie that combines suspense with such beautiful visuals, and Sleepy Hollow balances these incredibly well. The film's imperfections almost add to its charm, making it one of those Burton films that, for me, gets better with every Halloween viewing. So how do I score it? I'd say Sleepy Hollow deserves a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's not Burton's absolute best, but it's an enchanting and thrilling ride that showcases his unique style and creative flair. For those nights when you want a gothic adventure that has enough scares to keep you on edge, but isn't too heavy, Sleepy Hollow is the perfect pick. And for me, it's one that'll always have a spot in my Halloween lineup. So that's going to wrap us up on Sleepy Hollow. I hope you enjoyed diving into Burton's dark, fog-filled world with me. It's always a treat to explore his take on horror. And that brings me to another thing. If you are a lover of horror, which I am, check us out at Real Talk Horror, where we just go through horror directors, horror movies, and go down and dirty into the world of horror films. But next up on this channel, we're diving into a very different side of Burton's career with the 2001 film Planet of the Apes. I know this one stirs up some strong opinions, and whether you're on the love it or hate it side, it's definitely an intriguing film to unpack. Burton takes us from 18th century to New York to a futuristic world of talking apes. What a jump, right? As always, if you're enjoying this series, please subscribe, rate, leave me a review. It helps others find the show and keeps us rolling with more Burton-inspired episodes. And hey, if you're on Threads or Instagram, you can follow us at Real Talk. I post updates, teasers, behind-the-scenes content, and other conversations, so come join us over there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Sleepy Hollow. Did it give you chills, make you laugh, or leave you thinking about the Horseman long after you left the theater? But as always, thank you for joining me here on Real Talk. Until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling.